And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome to the show tonight the incredible Danielle Girard, here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book, Up Close, and to take all of your most burning questions. Danielle, tell us about this book.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Sarah. I'm super excited about Close. I just got the final non-arc versions of them. Up Close is the third book in the Badlands thriller series, which is set in a fictitious town in Hagen, North Dakota. And in this book, three teenagers die mysteriously in different situations. And the main, our detective Kylie, who's been in all three books, is trying to figure out what connects these three deaths, how these kids are getting themselves into trouble, and try to stop it all before the next kid dies.
Whew, you cooked us good, Danielle Girard. And we got a lot. I have a lot of questions, and I know everyone watching has a lot of questions. And I can't wait to get into every single delicious detail. First, I just want to welcome everyone. So, we are going live to 6 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So, mystery and thriller loving friends, no matter where you're watching from, you are in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're going to make them a little less painful for you. So, if you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, welcome, friends. We're so happy to have you. Here's the drill. Every Monday, I give you my handpicked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Danielle about this fictitious town. Ask her about these missing teenagers. Ask her what it's like to be a mom writing about a parent's worst nightmare. Oh, my heart is just clenching thinking about it. Plus, I have all of her praise, all of her blurbs. We've got so much to talk about. I can't wait. So go ahead and get your questions going in the chat, and I'll get them right over to her. Catch a clue. Welcome to the conversation, saying hello, Danielle and Sarah. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
So good to have you. Susan, welcome to the conversation, joining us from Nashville. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the conversation. So great to have you. Now, while y'all are thinking of your questions, I'm going to kick off with some of this incredible praise because, y'all, the praise is so good. So let's kick off here with JT Ellison. She was on the show for her national launch party for her most recent book, It's One of Us, and she has some incredible words of praise to share. Let's pop them up, take a peek. So she says, in this complicated kaleidoscope of a story, Girard effortlessly ratchets up the tension page by page until the shocking ending. Up Close's nightmarish premise is executed flawlessly. This thrilling tale from one of our best suspense writers will keep you up late into the night. Highly recommended. First of all, congratulations on that amazing bit of praise from New York Times bestselling author JT Ellison. Danielle, let's get right into the craft. So first of all, let's talk about, because this is the third book in the series, this is not your first rodeo. What have you learned about how to ratchet up the tension page by page until a shocking ending? Give us your secrets.
Well, so this is my 16th published novel, so it's definitely not my first rodeo. I think the one thing that really works successfully is to always leave the reader right the moment before anything is resolved at the end of a chapter, right? You know this. Leave them hanging. And then keep, I mean, I like a short chapter. I like the idea that, oh my gosh, I just want to read one more chapter, and all of a sudden you're like, it's midnight, but I'm done with the book. That's the kind of book I love to read. And it's the
Literally.
Yes.
Oh my God. So, okay. So leaving the reader on that edge at the end of the chapter and keeping us up, sleep deprived. We're all blaming you. We hold you personally responsible, Danielle. These circles are thanks to you. So have you learned anything else from book 1 to book 16 and from book 1 to book 3 in the Badlands series?
I mean, I feel like every book, what you try to do is just make every book a little bit better and a little bit different. So this is the end of the series. So that feels different too. And there's always a mixed emotion, right? For one, I'm really excited to explore a new place or person or, world. And also I'm a little sad. So when I write the third book in a series, or the last book, I'm trying to figure out how to leave these characters, in a place that feels comfortable. You can't tie everything up with a bow because that is not real life in my mind, but you can at least say readers will walk away and be like, okay, everyone's going to be they're going to also, move forward, and there's good stuff happening. And so I'm not one to leave us like we're, it's not Armageddon. There's and I really, I love reading thrillers, and I love thriller, that's my medicine of choice. And they are such a wonderful, escape from reality. But I also feel like I need a little, I mean, the world is hard enough. I need a little at the end, like, oh, okay. I need that. Just a tiny bit of like, it's going to be okay. So
So, first of all, why did you choose to end the series on after 3 books instead of a K. Scarpetta 36 book series? Why? I mean, 3, I love threes. Good things come in threes, but why now?
it felt right. I have a 5-book series, a 4-book series, and now a 3-book series. And then I've just written a standalone. I was really excited to write the standalone. I feel like, and when I say it's done, it's always sort of a little bit in quotes. I have a new idea for the book, that the series that has only 4 books right now. So it's never exactly done, but it's at a good place. I feel like I'm leaving everybody in a good place, and that feels good. So I kind of think, well, you never know. It's like revisiting, your favorite book or your favorite place. I'm not going to say it's done, but I did feel like there was a huge arc in this book, with the main character, the detective, and also the secondary character who had been through a really lot of stuff in Whiteout and Far Gone. And it just felt like, okay, this is the time to sort of say, no more drama. Let's let these people, let's let them relax a little. It's a small, you don't want to, it's one thing to set a series in San Francisco and you can, last forever. But in a small town, like, it sort of gets to be to that, like, the Murder She Wrote, like everywhere that woman goes, you're like, somebody dies. Mine
Oh
aren't
my
cozy.
God, Jessica Fletcher. Oh,
Yeah,
my
Jessica
hero.
Fletcher, the Jessica Fletcher syndrome.
I love it. Sherry, welcome to the conversation. She wants to know, Danielle, do you need to read the first 2 books in the Badlands series before this one? Great question, Sherry.
Sherry, that is a great question. And you don't, definitely. The book standalone. I do always feel like if you're somebody who likes the series, start at Whiteout, because, there's always something that's built, and you're going to learn things in up close that you wouldn't want to know if you were starting Whiteout, if that makes sense. Or they will be alluded to, but every book stands alone. And if you're interested in a standalone, Whiteout or Up Close absolutely works as a standalone too.
Great question, Sherry. Thanks for asking that. Oh, hello, Lindsay Cameron. I just interviewed Lindsay Cameron just an hour ago. Hi, Lindsay Cameron. Thank you for joining us for her book. No One Needs to Know. She says, hi, Danielle and Sarah. 16 books is so impressive. Does the writing process get any easier / quicker? And Lindsay's asking on behalf of all of us.
I know. And Lindsay, I wish I had better news for you. I feel like it's different. I think, I actually interviewed, I also have a podcast, which Sarah's going to be on coming up. And Lindsay, I hope you'll join me one time too. But I talked to Sandra Brown, right? She's like, Sandra Brown is, I don't know, 120,000 New York Times bestselling novels. And she said every book, every time she starts, she says, I don't think I can do this. And I think that doesn't change. But that once you kind of get into it, you're like, oh, yeah, I remember this. I remember this feeling of like, this isn't quite right. So in some ways, yes, it does. And in some ways, I think it's just terrifying every time, right?
Why do you think it is so terrifying, Danielle?
I mean, you're creating a whole world, right? You're creating a whole world and a whole story, and all the pieces have to fit, and the characters have to feel real. And when you sort of think about what is being asked of you, and you're just like sitting alone in the basement, you think, this is impossible. Nobody can do this. This is, there should be a staff here to help me. So I think it's like how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. If you think about the fact that it's 100,000 words, it's however many plot points and however many twists and however many characters, that is like, you just make yourself crazy. So just one page at a time, one word at a time.
So nothing got easier from book 1 to book 16. It's the same terrifying struggle. This is, Lindsay, are you getting anxious and depressed? I am.
No, that's not true. Okay, I'll take it back.
Okay.
For one, the knowing when I'm going in the right direction. I'm not a plotter, which I really wish I were. So if you're plotters out there, I have to feel like you're better off than I have ever been. But
Lindsay just told us she's also not a plotter. So you're Team Panther.
Lindsay, we should talk. But I do feel like now I'm better at knowing like I'm going the wrong direction. I used to be like I'd get a whole draft done and realize half of it really didn't fit, and that was way worse than what I do now, which is maybe more like 15% of it isn't quite right, or has to get cut or replaced with another 15%. It's not, although I have had those situations more recently, but in general, that part gets easier. You kind of listen to your gut better.
Interesting. Okay, so you listen to your gut better, but it never gets easier.
I mean, how about we say it never gets easy?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I love that. That's different and that feels more manageable. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, great. Danielle, let's get into some of this amazing other praise that your book has earned, because you're writing like it is easy. So first, so secondly, from Tessa Weggert, she is the author of the Shayna Merchant series and her most book, The Kind to Kill. She came on to Ghost Inside Scoop in December. She says Danielle Girard's finely honed talents are on full display in her latest thriller, which marks the return of canny detective Kylie Milliard and peels back layers of secrets to reveal a sinister puzzle that's too close to home, a vivid and emotional white knuckle read. So I love that it is both vivid and emotional. And what's interesting is that Lindsay just shared that she was actually late to the thriller genre. She actually was a women's fiction reader and a women's fiction writer. And an editor gave her feedback that she needed to step up the pace and pace it like a thriller. So she had always thought of thrillers as the purview of men. So I think what's really interesting about this review is that it's not just a white knuckle thriller, as Tessa said. It is a vivid and emotional white knuckle thriller, white knuckle read, and that it's that complexity for me that set it apart. Tell us about crafting that.
Well, I think actually that one of the things I learned that's so important is that there is a marriage of the character and the plot. So it's not just like you take any character and put them in a very harrowing situation, which this would be, of course, for anybody, any detective in a small town dealing with nobody freaks out more than parents. So now you've got like 3 dead kids, 6 crazed parents, and then you've got the whole town is going, who's next? What's happening? This is terrifying. And I think if you put the right character with that, somebody who's feels it's so like is not a mother, so everybody discounts her opinion on motherhood, right? And I mean, I think that's, which is fair, sort of, except for she knows it's her job to keep these kids safe, and she is terrified, and she has a mixed emotions about parenthood. She's a late 30s-ish woman who's hears her clock ticking, and so this brings up, it's not just that she's dealing with the crime, because she is dealing with all of her own emotional stuff, the way she grew up, her parents, and her, the relationship she's in, her desire or indecision about, being a parent, because of course we know it's a really mixed gig, parenting. There's fabulous moments, but like we talked about, before we were on the air, it's a terrifying venture, especially the way the world is now. Terrifying. So by taking a character who's already got issues around the plot, and then a plot that speaks to those issues, I feel like that's how you really make something emotional, right? It matters to her, not just because it's her job, but for more than that.
Interesting. Now, speaking of motherhood, Danielle, so your book starts off with the chilling phrase, it's every parent's worst nightmare. Now, you yourself are a parent. So what was that process like for you to explore the thing that you fear the most? Was that therapeutic? Was it terrifying? Were you white knuckling it through the writing?
I have to say I think it's easier now. My kids are 21 and 23. So they, although it's still terrifying, of course, the world is much harder. My first book came out when my daughter was 8 months old. So I've been at this for a really long time. And I wrote basically a book that people kind of compared to Silence of the Lambs, called Savage Art. And it was about a mother whose child was, abducted. And that was it's almost like I'm a worst case scenario thinker. And so part of writing these books is
Mm,
working out how these things might get resolved. But
mm.
it's, it's both. It's terrifying. It's almost like, I don't know, I'm just wired this way. There's a part of me that's like, why don't you write romance? Look at all the people reading romance. I mean, you can read a romance novel in 3 hours. It's just not my DNA. My DNA is like, how dark can we go? And what can we explore about, this and the stakes, right? Life and death. There's just no greater stakes. So I'm kind of addicted to it.
Oops, I had myself muted because I
I
was
was going to say, like, uh-oh.
I was gesticulating wildly. I was giving you a hand dance. I was just reading Sarah Weinman's book, looking at true crime, and she was sharing some statistics about how it's interesting that most consumers of true crime, readers, watchers, viewers, podcast listeners, are women, and yet women are almost always the victims of the crime. And is that affecting our mental health? And studies are showing that actually people who are consumers of these dark books, be it true crime, she was saying for true crime, but I think it's actually applicable for thrillers as well, may be less likely to engage socially with strangers because everyone's thinking, this could be a killer.
Right.
So and I'm also a worst case scenario thinker. So is it amping up your anxiety, or is it therapeutic?
I think the process of writing is therapeutic for me. I found that I took I started writing. So my first book came out in 2000, so that's 23 years ago. I took 1 year off of writing in 2011, and I don't think my anxiety was ever higher than it was that year. So there is something, not to say that stories don't freak me out, true crime freaks me out. I'm actually not weirdly a true crime junkie. I love the idea that I can pretend everything I read is just made up and stuff like that doesn't happen, even
Ooh,
though of course we know that it does. And then when I finish a book, I'm like, well, thank goodness that was just made up.
okay.
But I do think that there's something cathartic in writing because you get to be in the perspective of the person who's solving the crimes. I have actually written, though, from the perspective of pedophile. In my book Chasing Darkness, I had a pedophile character, and Jerry. And it's weird, and this is, I'm sure I'm gonna get some more hate mail. But what is weird is that there was a part of me that felt empathy for that character, right? He has a disease. Now, we don't want him anywhere near anybody's children, but his self-loathing, I think that's not every pedophile. There's probably plenty of them who are just, most of them maybe are awful, but this one had, he had a heart and he knew that what he was doing was wrong, but it was a compulsion he couldn't control. And I like exploring the villains as well, because then nobody's all bad or all good. And if I can make one person think, oh God, I kind of feel bad for this pedophile. Now, then it's an uncomfortable but interesting opportunity to see something from a different perspective.
That is a tough tightrope to walk for you as the creator.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And so interesting that you were like, challenge accepted. This is the
Yeah.
challenge I'm willing to take. I commend your courage in writing that. Danielle, I want to get back to some of this amazing praise because you have so many incredible reviews here. Let's get over to Samantha Bailey saying Danielle Girard excels at creating complex characters. Speaking of complex characters with intricate relationships who enthrall while leading us on a gripping, suspenseful journey to the truth. As the threads come together with pulse pounding reveals, I could not step away from this book for a second. A nail biting read. Congratulations on that amazing praise. Samantha was on when her latest book, Watch Out for Her, came on, and she is not the only one raving. Jess Lowry, Edgar nominated and Thriller Award winner of The Quarry Girls, raving Alleluia. Detective Kylie Milliard and the folks of Hagen, North Dakota are back. The propulsive plot of Up Close will keep you turning the pages late into the night, while the deftly drawn characters, again, we know you like those gray characters, will make your heart ache. Danielle is at the top of her game. So let's talk about those characters a little bit more. What is the key, do you think, to writing complicated characters?
I think this is sort of like a stereotype from original, sort of the initial, like what Lindsay was talking about, sort of the male dominated noir, and where the detective is, you never get anything behind sort of the facade of his work, except for maybe he drinks too much and smokes and is a womanizer, whatever. I think nowadays, I think the things that I relate to in books is those moments of universal truth, right? That the idea, like, of being a parent, for instance, and it's a horrible thing to say, but there are moments of parenthood that you're like, why the F did I do this? This is so hard. And, whether it's particularly hard when they're little tiny and you can't negotiate with them and all they do is cry. That's super hard. And a lot of times women, we are more isolated with those children than the men are in general. And there are wonderful dads out there who are primary parents, and I'm not dissing them, but I'm just saying, like, it is and you talk about like what happened during the pandemic and how much that put women backwards in their careers, because again, the primary role comes to us, and it came to me. My job was much more flexible. My life was much more flexible. My husband, made more money. It just made sense for me to be the primary caregiver. But I think complex characters are the ones that can feel two things at once, because that's what we do. And so we are all a mess of contradictions and conflict that's internal and external. And I love to sort of dig out, like, well, what's the ugly side of that, our hero? Because we all have an ugly side, and we don't like to show them.
Exactly. And I will say that was one of the many things that I really enjoyed about your book, because I struggled to do that, to be totally honest, because I'm like, but I went, I don't know what it is, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to make their lives easier, or I secretly, like, subconsciously want to make them likable, which is both of which
Yes.
are the death knell to any book. So I need to rein myself in, but I'm like, oh, I don't want to see you suffer.
That, and and I have that inclination too. And a good editor's always been like, oh no, you got to like string him out more, push him out more. And so I've learned over time, that, that's that is, because what we're talking about here, what makes these stakes so high is that the situation just gets worse for our character, right? It gets worse and worse until there's like, literally, this person is pinned in a corner that she has no choice but to do something, unlikable, or,
Mm.
unthinkable, or uncomfortable, or whatever. And I love that. But you're right. I want to save my people too.
Oh,
But
thank you for saying that. I almost was too embarrassed to admit it. So because I was like, I can't confess this
no,
to this master of
no.
the person who's taken on the challenge of writing a pedophile. And I'm
Oh,
like, go ahead, little one.
yeah, no, that, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I actually, I encourage people to tell me what they think of Jerry, because he's in many ways less unlikable than a lot of characters in a lot of my books. So, um,
Interesting.
yeah, but I think that's right. We have to make them uncomfortable, because otherwise, there's not enough conflict to sustain the story, right?
Yes, exactly.
And we want to see people succeed beyond, like, after really trying. That's another thing, is like, the harder the situation is, when our character, succeeds and triumphs in whatever way they do, we're just like, yes, they did it, despite the odds, which were way stacked against them.
Ooh, yes, exactly. We're cheering because there's something inherent about all of us that we want to cheer for the underdog. We want them
Yeah.
to succeed. Oh, I love that. Y'all, I want to remind you, this book is not even out yet. Danielle is coming on here as a very special first time exclusive glimpse into her book before the book comes out. So pre-order now, y'all. No matter where you're watching from, here is the link for our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore. That is, of course, Murder by the Book. So here's that link. Click and order, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Click, click, click. Order, 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 so that you too can immerse yourself in the world of Hagen, North Dakota, and the mystery that Danielle has artfully woven for us. So here is that link. I want to also get over to, we're not going to probably have time to get to all the praise, but I did want to get to a few more amazing rave reviews. Jillian Medoff raves, Danielle Girard is a phenomenal writer, and up close, her insightful and compulsively readable new novel. She creates a vivid portrait of a tight-knit small town grappling with a series of teenage deaths, accident or murder. Girard keeps you guessing until the final breathtaking twist. So Danielle, let's talk about that, because I was interested that this was one of the reviews that talked about the location almost as a character. So why
Yeah.
did you want to set a book a three book series
Yeah.
in the Badlands?
So it's funny, because I'm in Montana and all my other books have been set in the Bay Area, in one series they travel also to the South, but mostly they've been in the Bay Area. But people have been like, why are you writing about Montana? And I think there's a reason, is that I don't really want these things to happen in Montana. I'm feeling very safe here. But I went to Williston, North Dakota, which is where the Bakken and all the oil stuff. And I was very intrigued about that sort of boom and bust and what happened there. And rather than write about Williston, which is, got lovely people and very few murders, and I didn't want to bring anything bad to that small town, I created a sort of, it's an echo of an early Williston. It's much smaller, but it's sort of vaguely in the same area. It's dealt with the oil, all the rush of money in, when the oil was found, and then of course when the companies all left, and sort of the bust that followed. So it's got that sort of it's a Midwest. I mean, Montana's sort of, Western Midwest, and so it's got similarities to the town I live in, but it's further away.
Interesting. So that is interesting that you have previously chosen to set your books far away, somewhere else that's nowhere near you, that's nowhere near Montana. But this one you did want to bring it closer home, because I watched a documentary about that oil. And I'm totally blanking on the name of it, but about how, it had popped this town, this whole thing had popped up, and then, and the fallout for the people, for the area. It was a very fascinating look. And so that was something that was, did you see the documentary and then you wanted to go there and learn more about it and then set your book there?
I actually talked to a woman who was a reader of mine, and she reached out, and we got connected, and I asked about where she lived, and I had read about it. I haven't seen the documentary, although it sounds really interesting. And then for some reason I was like, there's just something about it that sounded, because there is something really interesting in a town that goes through, and where I live in Montana has also gone through kind of a massive growth thing. I don't know that we're going to get smaller again, but there is something that's, for the people who were sort of born and raised there, it's different. And that's another thing that's interesting for Kylie, because she's from Fargo. So she's not a native, right? She's a city girl. They think of her as a city girl in this small town. And she's the only woman in the police force, and she's a woman. So she's, it's all of these, and it's a different world for her. And she wanted really badly to get out of it initially. And then she sort of settled into her role. So it's been fun. I've never done a fictitious town. I lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, when I wrote some of my first books. So that felt, like it was home. It was easy to go to the city. It's kind of fun to invent a town, because then you kind of get to draw Main Street and figure out where everybody, where the buildings are and where the police department is and what's next to us, the church look like. So that's a different thing. You don't have to worry about being so authentic. Like I always was terrified that I would take people down the wrong street in San Francisco, and it would be one way in the opposite direction. And I know an author who did that, and I never heard the end of it. So it's in one way, in some ways it's nice, because people can't go there and check my work.
But true. And if you're going to write 3 books there, you have to remember which way Main Street's flowing, where you put different things. So do you have a little... I
have a style guide, where you remember that, because there's people that show up again, like the guy, the woman who runs the post office, or and they're not in all the books. And I love making kind of quirky one-off characters. So the coroner, there's not a morgue in Hagen. It's too small. So the big cases get sent up to the state lab, which is in Bismarck. So, there's the coroner's he's also like a wine connoisseur, and he loves, he's like red meat and wine. He's sort of a bigger guy, but he's quirky and really fun. And so, I have to know all my details about that guy before I bring him into the next book, or I'd be embarrassed if I messed something up.
Right. I mean, that's a lot to keep straight over the course of 3 books. Great question here from a mystery friend asking, what was your inspiration to become an author, Danielle?
It's such a good question. I was pre-med with a minor in Italian, and I spent 10 years in finance.
Oh my God.
I know, because my parents were like, no way, you cannot do something creative. My dad was a doctor. My mom was in business. I was like, give for something practical. And they did not like the idea of law. So that was kind of out. So I was on this track of I'll try medicine, and then I'll go into business. And I met a woman who wrote romance novels, who I'm still really good friends with. And I was like, I think I want to write a book. And she just encouraged me to like sit down and write it, you know. And of course, when you first start writing a book, you want to show every page to somebody and be like, what do you think? What do you think? And she was very encouraging. She also said, no, I don't want to see it until you've got like 50 pages. And it was really, and it's buried in the backyard. It had a great title. The title of that book was Murders and Acquisitions, which I thought was very
Oh my
clever.
God, I love it. I worked in finance for 10 years too, and I did PR marketing for 14, and I love that title. Murders and Acquisitions. It's so perfect. Oh my
I
God, it's so
know.
perfect. Okay, so you know you met this romance author. She encouraged you to do it. So do you have a critique group that you work with? Do you still feel the compulsion to share every page, or is it just you and your editor at this point, 16
I
books
mean,
in?
I definitely do not share every page anymore. And I do have readers. I work with a freelance editor actually, who's amazing. And that is actually, the first time ever, this last book, which is standalone, she and I worked together like every 2 weeks, and I'd send her a chunk and we'd talk about it. And then I send her another chunk. I have beta readers too, but there's something about one voice, if you trust it implicitly, that it kind of cuts down the noise, and it really has helped me. But I have one. I don't have a critique group, but I have multiple critique partners that I send things to, and I read their stuff. And in fact, some of the people that you quoted have been, were critique partners for this book. So, well, I guess Tessa, I should say, is a critique partner, and I think it's really important to have people who can be honest, which is hard, right?
It is hard because if you care about that person and you get to know that person, you get to trust that person, it's a tough conversation to say, I love you, I love your work, and yet this is not working for me, and here's why.
Exactly.
But that's the most valuable, the hardest thing to say is the most valuable thing to hear.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have your freelance, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, somebody has to be honest with you, and you still have to let it resonate and be like, does that resonate with me? I usually find my first voice is, that can't be right. And then, then I'm like, oh, but it actually is right. So, yeah.
Okay, so you have the freelance editor, then you also have beta readers, and then you also have critique partners.
Yes, I have it all.
Okay, great. Y'all, I just want to remind you, this book is literally not even out yet. This is Danielle's first pre-launch exclusive Q&A. She is coming on here to spill the tea on all things up close. So once again, here is that link to pre-order now. So if you're on Facebook or on YouTube, here is that link. Click and pre-order from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book. The legendary Murder by the Book. Here is that link. And then hop on over to Mystery and Thriller Mavens, where all the good tea is spilled. And tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about Kylie. Tell us what you think about Hagen. Tell us what you think about this, all of the things that I'm popping the link up in there as well. Tell us about what you think so that you too can join the conversation. And so here is that link for Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Danielle, Girard, what a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for coming on to give us the up close and personal scoop on Up Close. What a pleasure to chat with you and learn about you and about your Pets publication and about your book. Please come back when your next book is on. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for having me. And I'm so excited to see you at Thriller Fest in New York City in just a few weeks. I'm super excited. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, come by and tell me what you think too. I'd love to hear it. So,
ooh, you heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first. All right, that is a wrap on Mystery Monday. Hope y'all have a killer week, and I will see you next Monday. Take very good care until then.